Lloyd Florence was rushed down the street as the massive explosion tore right through the night behind him. The timer on the oil tank car's bomb finally hit zero, resulting in a massive fireball set the remain of the train yards on fire. Far away in the distance, Lloyd also saw another explosive rip through the night, causing a huge mushroom cloud to rise above the lightning up in the sky. Lloyd had felt his blood run cold upon realizing that the other explosion had come from the factory. He began his fearing for Kim and Ron's lives, and they had made it out? Ron and Kim, are they alive? Lloyd would have had to try to contact Ron on his communicator, but his devices had been destroyed when the Black Shadow caught him. Knowing that the underground hideout had been compromised, Lloyd had to find Dr. Director in hope that his friend Nelson escaped the capture. Lloyd also made a personal note to thank Ron for saving his life if he had survived the explosion. The sound of sirens could be heard as Lloyd saw a fleet of fire engines heading towards his direction, as well as a Global Justice patrol car. Lloyd ran to the edge of the sidewalk and began trying to flag down the police patrol car. To his luck, Dr. Director was the one driving it, and quickly spotted Lloyd on his side of the road and pulled over. "Agent Lloyd Florence, are you all right? Where's Ron?" Dr. Director asked, relieved to see Lloyd still alive. "He rushed down to the abandoned factory after he freed me from the chains. The Black Shadow destroyed my communication devices, so I wasn't able to reach him or you," Lloyd explained as he climbed into the passenger side of the patrol car. "I've been trying to reach him too, but I'm not getting a response." Dr. Director paused, trembling with fear. "I'm worried that Ron might have triggered the bombs." "Triggered? What are you talking about?" Lloyd asked in confusion. "Ridley said that in time he bombed both locations, but it was a lie. The factory was rigged with motion sensor bombs and Ron didn't know," Dr. Director replied. "I'm worried that Ron may have ended up setting the bombs off, and there's no way he or his captives could have survived it. Ridley said he rigged 4 of the fuel trucks to explode. An explosion like that would kill anyone close enough to it." "Then we better get down there and see if they made it out," Lloyd said. Dr. Director sped down the road of his patrol car with the car lights and sirens blaring. Once they arrived at the factory, they found the entire building on fire with 7 fire engines surrounding it and blasting it with their water cannons. Most of the building had collapsed into piles of burning rubble, although the lower parts have remained intact, but slowly burned away as the flames consumed it. Dr. Director pulled over her car and then collapsed at the fence that he observed as the entrance and got out with Lloyd behind her. "Kim? Ron? Where are you?" Betty called out, hoping that Ron and Kim had gotten out. "I don't see them anywhere, Betty," Lloyd said fearfully. You don't think that—" "No, I'm pretty sure they made it out." "They had to," Betty insisted, clearly starting to lose hope. 2 cops suddenly approached them, catching them by surprise. "Miss Director, I assume you're both looking for Agent Possible and Stoppable?" one of the officers asked. "Yes, did you see them?" Betty asked. The officers glanced at each other and Lloyd and noticed the other officer speaking to them had held what looked like towels in his hands. "What's that you've got there?" Lloyd questioned suspiciously. "Well, me and my partner searched the outside of the factory. We only found this," the officer replied, unfolding the towel. What Lloyd and Betty saw made their hearts sink. Inside the towel were Kim's mission clothes that appeared to be torn and tattered, and her communicator was broken in half. Next to it what appeared to be Ron's communicator, only it was half melted and burned and blackened to a crisp. As soon as Lloyd and Betty saw this, they knew the worst had happened, and they felt that the world around them starting to grow silent. "I'm sorry, Mr. Florence and Miss Director, but we didn't find any trace of agents of Possible and Ron except for these. The captives weren't found either," the officer partner said sadly. No, this," Betty stammered in horror. This is Ron's, and that's clearly Kim's clothing," Lloyd added. "And I don't like the look of this, Betty. We checked everywhere and we didn't see any traces of Agent Possible and Agent Stoppable. I hate to say this, but I don't think they made it out," the officer holding the towel explained. As if things couldn't get any worse, Dr. Director's phone rang and she quickly answered it. It was Nelson. "Betty, I'm sorry," he stammered, clearly sounding upset with a hint of anger as well. "Agent Rivers, what's going on? What happened?" Betty asked. "It's Ridley. He escaped about 10 minutes ago," Nelson replied. I don't know how, but the Black Shadow found the hideout and somehow raided it. 14 Black Shadow thugs in body armor advanced with laser rifles, broke in, and killed the other agents, then busted Ridley out. All they left was some large alien-looking shovel. It designedly was clearly Laudorian. I was the only one who got away. Dr. Director felt her heart nearly skip a beat when she heard this. How did the Black Shadow find him? None of her global justice agents had informers or silent sleeper agents, so there could have been no way for Black Shadow to find them. No, where are you now? Dr. Director stammered. Headed to the factory, and one of the Global Justice patrol cars were left behind. Are Ron and the others all right? Nelson asked. Betty went silent for a few seconds, then said in a grave voice, 2 cops found Kim's clothing and communicator completely destroyed. Ron's communicator was also found half melted at the scene, and there was no trace of him anywhere. I don't think they made it. Nelson went silent as well, but just for a bit longer. Then what do we do? He finally said. I don't know, Betty replied. Just then she and Lloyd heard a sound of yelling and shouting from the factory, and they looked up to see a large black fighter shuttle appear right before the fleet of the cop cars and fire engines. Its wings had the Black Shadow emblem on it, and a red flag with a white dot on the center, which had been the black red-eyed skull with the crosswords on it, and then began firing its laser cannons at the burning factory. It would then open fire on the cop cars as the cops began shooting at the police shotguns. The shuttle then suddenly turned its attention towards Lloyd, and when the voice boomed out from it, it was Ridley. So Stoppable managed to free me, Florence. Well, your heroes are all dead now. And so are you, Ridley's voice mocked from the PA speaker, built into somewhere in the shuttle. The shuttle then fired its laser cannons directly at him, and as Lloyd quickly jumped out of the way before the beams could hit him, Dr. Director was blown away from the force of the beams blasting them, but the officers around them quickly vaporized 2 more of the blasters that hit him. Lloyd knew that he needed to get as far away as he could from Ridley before vaporizing him, so he ran towards the wooded area that it wouldn't be so hard for Ridley to spot him. Running away, are you, Florence? Such a cowardly move coming from you. So you weren't cowardly when you ruined my fun back in 1999, Ridley yelled at Lloyd from the fighter shuttle, his voice filled with hate. And you got what you deserved, Lloyd yelled back as he jumped back away from the oncoming laser blasts. Now I'm returning the favor, Ridley shot back, firing at him. Lloyd dove into the woods, causing Ridley to lose sight of him. He then headed deeper into the woods and heard more shouting and the sound of Ridley's voice cursing. Lloyd could also hear more laser fire coming from behind him. Meddlesome screws, you're not going to deny me revenge. Piss off, Ridley yelled outside of the woods, followed by more laser fire cannon. Lloyd hid behind the tree in hopes that Dr. Director had gotten away safely, and Lloyd knew that he had to lose Ridley somehow, but feared that he may have found him once he left the woods. He was also deeply concerned about what to do now. It was clear that Ron and Kim were dead, and as well as their families and friends. Lloyd had no idea what to do. Ridley had finally got what we wanted, was limiting Team Possible. Lloyd didn't even know how it could have been possible, but Ridley had actually done it. Kim Possible and Ron Stoppable were dead, and now with them gone, who would be able to stop Black Shadow? The sound of the shuttle engines could now be heard hoovering around the trees. I know you're down there somewhere, Florence. You can't stay hiding in there forever. Once you leave, here I will be, Ridley taunted. Your heroes are dead, and with Global Justice HQ now destroyed, no one will oppose me. My organization will no longer be an organization, but rather a global empire, and that I will rule with an iron fist. Once you and Betty Director are gone, nothing will stand in my way. Lloyd slowly made his way out through the woods, trying to stay out of Ridley's sight as his ship flew higher above the trees, shining a searchlight from above it into the woods. As Lloyd carefully moved slowly between tons of trees, he heard a branch crunch behind him. Lloyd spun around to see Dr. Director behind him, with a revolver in her hands. We need to get out of here, Lloyd. This fire is starting to spread further because of Ridley's attack, she warned him quietly. Where will we go now? The hideout where Ridley was being held is now compromised, Lloyd asked. There is one more place that no one else except me and a few selected ancients know about, and it will serve as our new hiding zone, Betty replied. Before Lloyd can answer, a large black glacier struck several trees near them, blasting them into ashes. Ridley had spotted them. Did you pathetic ancients think you could hide from me? No one escapes me, he mocked. Just then, a large blast of green energy suddenly slammed onto the side of the shuttle, sending it flying back several inches. What the hell? Ridley exclaimed, spinning like a shuttle around to face his attacker. Lloyd and Dr. Director then turned suddenly to see none other than Shigo standing near a patch of fallen trees in her green and black Team Go outfit, glaring up at Ridley's fighter shuttle with vengeance. Nelson also appeared from behind her with a police armor. You gonna pay for killing Kimmy, you hear me, you bastard? Shigo roared at the shuttle, with tears streaming down her face. Well, if it isn't Shigo, Ridley mocked. I honestly didn't expect you to drop into the party, and since you brought Agent Nelson with you, this is even better than ever. I can now kill 4 birds with 1 stone. The only one dying here tonight is you monster, Shigo yelled. I know what you did. You killed them all in that factory. I didn't kill them, my dear, Ridley corrected her with a tone of taunting manner. Stoppable did that. He never saw those emotion sensor bombs coming. He was such a fool and fell right into my trap. Now Team Possible is no more. Shigo clenched her fists angrily with rage, then unleashed a massive plasma ball at Ridley's fighter, which struck one of the wings as he attempted to dodge it. This damaged one of the anti-gravity engines in the shuttle, causing Ridley to partially lose control of it. The shuttle flew up higher as it spun around briefly in a circle, slowly circling around. You're not getting away from me, Shigo roared, throwing more plasma balls at the shuttle. However, Ridley managed to raise the shields, blocking her attacks. The ship then spun around until Ridley gained control. I grew very wary of you, you meddling shits. Even after you lost 2 of your best heroes, you still continue to fight me. It's time to end this, Ridley growled angrily. The bottom of the ship suddenly slid open and revealed a large cannon aimed directly at Shigo and the Everfree. I've been saving this new weapon for a rainy day, and I think I should give it a test right now, Ridley said, charging the cannon. It's just a shame that you had to die, Shigo. I actually really considered recruiting you and dragging into my organization in the past, but I can see now that I would have made a bad mistake. Now you'll join Team Possible's fate along with your other 2 friends here. Betty, Lloyd, Nelson, and ran in the split directions as Shigo attempted to strike Ridley's shuttle again. As the cannon began powering up, Shigo then unleashed multiple plasma attacks at his ship, hitting the shield in the process. Lloyd then glanced at Ridley's shuttle as the cannon began glowing red, then at Shigo as she continued to throw the ball after ball of plasma at the shield, hoping to break through it. Realizing that Shigo wasn't going to actually hit it, Lloyd quickly rushed forward and pushed her out of the way, just as the cannon fired at her. The blast struck the ground right in front of Lloyd with a force so powerful that it shook the ground and sent him flying across the woods into a dead tree. Lloyd slammed against the trunk so much force that it shattered several bones of his body, knocking him out cold. Lloyd! Nelson yelled, running after him. Ridley's shuttle spun around, preparing to fire the cannon again, but Shigo unleashed a huge blast of plasma from her fist, which hit the shields on Ridley's shuttle so hard it caused the sparks to fly somewhere at the back of the ship. The shield had vanished, and Shigo struck the cannons on the bottom of Ridley's ship, blowing it to pieces. You vandal, you're going to pay for this! Ridley roared angrily. Forget it, bastard! Shigo yelled back, hitting the shuttle with another blast of plasma. This time it struck both the wings, and it caused extensive damage to the main engines, forcing Ridley to retreat. This isn't over, Shigo! I'll be back to finish the job, and this time, Team Possible won't be here to save you, Ridley snarled. The shuttle spun around and then turned invisible once the cloaking device was switched on. He was gone after that. Ridley was gone, so Nelson quickly looked around and saw Lloyd slumped over near the bottom of the tree he had hit. Betty and Shigo ran up to him alongside Nelson. Is he dead? Betty asked fearfully. No, he's still breathing, Shigo replied, seeing Lloyd's chest moving up and down slowly. We need to get him to the hospital right away, Nelson replied. reaching down and scoping up Lloyd in his arms. No, without Team Possible, and Ridley now on the loose again, we can't risk it, Betty replied. This hideout I'll be taking us to as more advanced medical facility was built using Laudorian and human technology. We need to take Lloyd there, and quickly. Me and Shiga will follow you in my patrol car, Nelson replied. Drew Lipsky came along with me as well, and he's waiting in my patrol car. Probably cowering like he sometimes tends to do, Shiga replied. He hid in the trunk after we arrived here. That actually wasn't a really bad move, Betty replied. Ridley may have targeted him as well if he joined you. Guys, we need to get to Lloyd to a hideout. He's having trouble breathing, Nelson urged the top of the group as he held his friend in his arms. All right, let's move, Betty replied. The group then rushed back to Betty and Nelson's patrol cars, parked near the curb next to the still burning factory. More engines fired and arrived to put the fire out, and several ambulances also arrived. Access from the injured have been taken to the brunt of Ridley's onslaught. Lloyd was in place in the back of Betty's patrol car, and then she rushed to several patrol cars as Nelson climbed into his patrol car. Shiga opened the trunk and found Dr. Draken inside of it. Drew, we gotta get out of here now. Get out of the trunk, Shiga snapped, pulling him out. Is that crazy guy in that ship gone? I saw him shooting up the place, Drew said. Yeah, and he ended up hurting Agent Florence. He's being taken to another global justice hideout, and we're going there with him, Shiga replied. I take it we're going to be living there now? Drew asked, climbing out of the trunk and closing it. Most likely, Shiga replied gravely. The other hideout was compromised, and in addition to that, Kim and Ron are both... She paused, and Drew noticed tears in her eyes. I know, he said, just looking as upset as Shiga. Nelson told me everything, and I didn't want to believe that at first, but when I saw the burning building... He sighed and then climbed into Nelson's patrol car with Shiga entering the seat next to him. I know, Shiga said, wiping tears from her eyes. They may have been our enemies in the past, but they were really the best heroes I've ever met in my life. And now that they're both gone, what will we do now? Drew asked as the patrol car rushed away from the scene. We'll have to go into hiding, Nelson cut in. I looked over the evidence that Kim and Ron found in that dark wood, and from what I gathered, Ridley's amassed through enough power to take over the entire planet. Well, we gotta stop him then, Shiga insisted. No, we can't, Nelson replied sadly. The Black Shadow has infiltrated every single government, law enforcement agency, and almost every government form in the power you could think of. The only thing we could do now is we go into hiding and form a resistance and movement. In time, it should grow big enough for us and hopefully take back control from the Black Shadow. You've got to be kidding me. We're just gonna let them enslave the world? Shiga argued. Shiga, Global Justice HQ was destroyed along with most of its ancients. Kim and Ron are both dead along with Wade and their families. Even Team Go wouldn't be able to stop an invasion like this, Nelson explained harshly. This isn't like the Laudorian invasion. The Black Shadow had managed to win by undermining governmental powers and law enforcement agencies in secret. And as far as the world is concerned, Black Shadow has ceased to exist in 1999. No one knows but us about the truth. Once the invasion finally happens, no one will be able to stop it. Think of it as like living in a Germany takeover in World War II. Yeah, and for all we know what happened after that, Shiga shot back. Are you saying the whole world is going to end up like this twisted version of World War II? From what I could gather from the evidence found in Darkwood, yes, Nelson replied. Ridley will rule this world by sword, and anyone who doesn't support his empire or ideals will be branded as enemies of the empire and be treated similar to the way non-supporters of World War II Germany and the Soviet-Russian Union were treated for not only their supported tyrannical leaders, but the world is actually going to end up being a very dark, horrid place from here from now on. And we'll need to do everything what we can to try and form a resistance that they may hopefully become a rebellion that we can restore freedom to the world someday. What if we're not able to do that? What if Ridley finds us somehow and tracks us down, every single person not supporting him? He has a Laudorian technology after all, Dr. Draken pointed out. We'll find a way, Nelson replied. History has proven that not all tyrannical empires last forever, And it's also proven that people who believe the truth, justice, and freedom will always find a way to overthrow their tyrannical governments. It may not happen overnight or sometime soon, but it may happen someday, and we'll be the ones to make it happen. Well then, I guess that's it then, Shigo replied grimly. We've lost this fight. We lost it long before then, Shigo, Nelson corrected. We lost the fight to Ridley and broke out of prison and slowly rebuilt his organization in the shadows. He and his organization invested every aspect of this method of manipulation, coercion, power, and control of exactly this day. No one even saw us coming. If Lloyd had just killed Ridley back in 1999, this wouldn't have happened, Shigo said coldly. Lloyd actually told me that he regrets sparing Ridley's life back in that year, Nelson replied. We invaded the drug house and captured Ridley. He had the opportunity to shoot him that night as he cornered him, but he chose to taser him instead since he felt like this wasn't his place to decide who lives or dies. Lloyd knew that Ridley was a monster back then, but he still didn't kill him since it would make him no better than Ridley. Well, that choice leads us to where we are now, Dr. Draken said, sounding a bit angry. Thanks to Lloyd sparing this madman's life, the world's going to be enslaved by him. Granted, I may have tried taking over the world in the past few times, but I would never do something like those monsters have done. Drew, we can't blame Lloyd for what's happened, Nelson rebutted. There is really no way for him to know what Ridley would do. No one could have known at this time. I know, but... Draken paused for a loss of words. He may have unintentionally caused the world to be undermined since he spared Ridley's life, but Lloyd did save my life back there in those woods, so I gotta give him credit for that, Shigo added. Good point there, Dr. Draken replied. We'll find a way to take back the world from Black Shadow's control someday, and that's a promise, Nelson replied. Black Shadow only wins if all of us were silenced, and as long as we're still alive and fighting, Ridley has not won yet. They all rode in silence after Nelson raced behind Betty's patrol car ahead of him. With the lights and sirens blaring, he began to fear for Lloyd's life, as he was his best friend after all, and the idea of possibly losing him worried him. Nelson has also feared for the future of humanity. He knew that once Ridley enacted his plan, the whole world would be at his mercy. And what's worse is that some people may have support ideals. Of course, there would be those who believed in freedom and wouldn't want to live in such a world ruled by tyrants. And it was all left of global justice would hopefully find them and recruit them into a future resistance movement. Nelson had no idea how long it would take until Black Shadow would be thrown, but he knew that freedom would once again ring someday. Team Possible is dead. Their families and relatives are dead, and so is most of global justice. Me, Lloyd, Betty, and a few other agents are alive, and that's all that's left. The resistance that the government could take years to form, but we'll have to stay strong if we want to make it happen, Nelson thought. I won't let their deaths be in vain, and neither will the rest of us. Team Go is also still alive, and they could prove to be very valuable allies for our cause. So at least that's a start. Nelson let his thoughts wander back to the better days as they rode on. Lloyd was placed onto a medical bed attached to an advanced MRI scanner by two medical officers that slid through the scanner. Betty, Nelson, Shigo, and Drew had successfully made it back to Underground Hideout without any problems. Lloyd managed to survive the trip there. This global justice hideout was located 5 miles outside of Middleton City and was hidden so far underground about 30 feet. This was reinforced by special walls made with material from Ladorian tech to prevent radar signals from detecting anyone within it. It would also be able to fool enemy sensors thinking that it was a hideout when it was just flat ground, making it impossible for the Black Shadow to find it. As Lloyd was being examined in the MRI chamber, Betty was discussing plans for a future resistance movement with Nelson, Drew, and Shigo in another room. So as you may know, Black Shadow is already in the process of taking over the world. I've been listening to the world news, and there are reports of attacks of the governments all over the globe. Ridley has to also come out of the shadows and finally revealed himself to the world as well, so tons of people are panicking, Dr. Director explained. What's even worse is that the Black Shadow had managed to topple the Chinese government in less than a few hours ago, as well as the Russian government, and their factions have all been claimed to calm control of them. It's only a matter of time until our government falls, and then things are going to get very bad out there. I'll take that we'll be living down here from now on? Shigo asked. Yes, Betty replied. You can't just go back to reliving your old lives on the surface. Once Black Shadow takes over the U.S., you, Drew, and will become targets. Team Go will also be coming here as well, so they'll become insistent targets by Black Shadow. In time, we'll find more people who believe in freedom to join us in the potential no resistance. It's not going to be happening here overnight, though, so it will take months, and possibly years until we've found a rebellion enough to topple the global empire Ridley's creating. Just like how it took him 5 years for them to plan his invasion? Drew inquired. Exactly, Betty nodded. It would just take us 5 years or even longer to do the same. Only we'll be restoring freedom rather than taking it is. I just can't believe they're all gone, Shigo sighed, shaking her head. Kim, Ron, all their families, just gone. I know, Betty replied, clearly saddened by the reality of their deaths. Kim and Ron will always be the best agents, I know, and to lose any of them like that crushes me horribly. But we have to move on. Even if we just wallow their self-pity, we'll never get anywhere. We'll need to live and fight for them, for humanity. What about Lloyd? Will he be alright? Drew asked. As if on cue, the female Asian doctor came into the room and shut the doors. She had blue hair with blue eyes and dark purple lipstick. She wore glasses, purple high heels, and a white lab coat with a purple undershirt and a black skirt. She looked a bit distressed. Sorry if I'm interrupting you all, but I do have some bad news regarding Mr. Florence, she announced. Is he all right, Dr. Kitoda? Betty asked her. No, his injuries are quite severe, Dr. Kalota replied. Lloyd has suffered a bad concussion that left him comatose, so we're not really sure when he'll wake up. He has multiple broken bones that will require surgery to repair. He's also suffered some internal bleeding as well. The news greatly unsettled everyone in the room, including Nelson. Will he survive? He asked fearfully. Yes, but he'll be in a coma for quite some time, and we don't know when he'll wake up, Dr. Katoda replied. However, we will be able to start up a new project that may accelerate the healing process and cure various medical conditions once his surgery is complete. It will hopefully heal him to the point where he'll wake up from his coma. And what's this project of yours? Shigo asked curiously. Kralodolcius, Dr. Koita replied. My teams have been working on this for several medical coitus pods made from the Laudorian technology that can accelerate a patient's healing process. Normally they'd be put in the cryogenesis sleep to undergo the process. But since Lloyd's in a coma, he will still be asleep through the whole process, and we've got our fully working pods fully built and ready for use. But we'll need Betty's authorization since she's the head of global justice and this underground HQ. Are they safe? Dr. Draken asked curiously. We tested out a few patients with cancer, and they worked successfully. So yes, they're safe, Dr. Koita replied. I'll allow it, Betty replied. Agent Florence is a good man and a good agent. He saved Shigo's life, and he deserved a second chance. Very well then, Dr. Koita nodded. Once Agent Florence's surgery is completed, we'll place him in under one of the cryostatics pods to undergo the healing process. The pod should also cure the damage done to his brain from the concussion as well. Keep in mind that the healing process takes some patients a few weeks to heal, while one of them takes a month to heal. So we're not really sure how long it will take for Mr. Florence to heal. These pods are excellent prototypes after all. I am aware of that, Betty replied. It's clearly going to take a long time for Florence to heal due to the extent of injuries, but hopefully the pods will restore him back to full health. Alright, I'll notify my team that you approve, Dr. Koita replied. I've got to get back to the OR now. Very well then, you're free to go, Betty replied. Dr. Koita then left the room to inform the medical staff of Dr. Director's orders to have Lloyd placed into cryostasis pods after his surgery. The surgical procedures took several hours to complete, since Lloyd had multiple broken ribs, 2 busted forearms, punctured right lung, and a damaged gallbladder. All after that successful 4-hour surgery, Lloyd was wheeled out of the surgery room in a large square chamber with 4 egg-shaped corrosive pods lined up against the wall with life support machines attached to them. His heart monitor and vital signs monitor was also built onto the side of the pod, along with a control panel with the pod systems. Each pod was a transparent window that was near the top of the patient's head and face would be visible, allowing the medical teams to see how they were doing. Betty Shigo and Dr. Kowota and Drew Lipsky stood near the pod from the each left and had opened up to see that Lloyd would be placed inside. Inside of the pod, where had been cushioning, bed, and pillow, had been built into the interior to give the patient as much comfort as possible. It also had an IV needles and wires provided nutrients to the patient to monitor their vital signs. "So this is where he'll be snoozing for a while?" Shigo asked, glancing at the pod. "Yes, this pod will slowly heal his injuries and help accelerate the recovery. We don't know how long it will take, though," Dr. Koita replied, as Lloyd was lifted off the stretcher bed and placed into the pod. IV needles were inserted in his arm, and small wire stickers were placed all around his bare chest to monitor his vital signs while the cryostasis procedure. Once Lloyd was fully hooked up, Dr. Koita closed the pod's door and sealed it shut. Then she tapped in a few buttons to the inside of the pod. Then several blue light strips within lights up. Inside, the strange cloudy fog filled it up. The status is on the screen lit up, displaying Lloyd's vital signs and heart rate. The pods are now active. The screen will show us Lloyd's rate of recovery, which will take a while, Dr. Koyota informed the group. "So what now?" Draken asked. "Now we wait until he has fully healed," Betty replied. "There is nothing else we could do for him right now." They all headed out of the cryostasis chamber and headed down the long hall. Betty had already set up their living quarters for them to stay in together. She had also informed Team Go of the situation and gave them the location of the hideout. They'd be joining them shortly. While Shiko didn't exactly like the idea of being around her brothers, they were still a family, and she would be at least glad to have them be safe in the hideout. Things had only got worse for the last several hours. Black Shadow had taken over most of the world at this point, and also gained control of every nuclear weapon on the planet. Ridley had already forced Asia to complete their surrender after bombing Korea with a long-range nuclear missile, resulting in millions, death upon millions. The US government had also been hit by another nuclear bomb story shortly after Asia's surrender. The president's long-last message to the world before the nuke was hit the White House was for every American to go into hiding, form a resistance movement to try and one day take back the US from Ridley's control. Millions died over just a few hours, and upon realizing the Black Shadow had nuked the planet under their control, very close to remain of the government decided to surrender, and it would be better for an extinction. Most of Ridley's informers had managed to stage coups against the smaller governments, but he had made it clear to threats to the larger ones that he would send the whole planet back to the Stone Age, using every nuke on the planet if they refused to surrender to complete control of the organization. Some of them were hesitant, but after seeing the nuclear attacks on Korea and US, they knew better than to refuse. Even China was forced to surrender to the Black Shadow, knowing that their own nukes had been turned against them. The future was indeed looking very dark, as Ridley had put that in a video, and it didn't look like it was going to get better anytime soon. "Someday, we'll take back the world from Black Shadow, and this place where it all begins," Dr. Director thought, as she walked out of the hall with Shigo, Nelson, and Draken following behind her. "I won't let Kim and Ron's death be in vain. Ridley may have destroyed Team Possible and most of global justice, but he hasn't silenced us yet. As long as we're still breathing, he'll never have truly run." She prayed for luck that surely they all survive in the dark future ahead of them, and as for Lloyd's full recovery, Betty even thought of all the times Kim and Ron had worked with her together in the past. It brought her tears to her eyes. She had not been taking the time to mourn for their losses. But for now, in reality of it hit her hard. Kim and Ron had not only just been with the greatest heroes of global justice and the world ever known, they would also make their best friends that Betty ever had, and she had never seen them again. Not only that, but their families had also been killed in the explosion as well as their relatives. were later killed after the Black Shadow had raided their homes. It was beyond terrible. Betty felt a horrible amount of sadness rushing through her. Both Kim's brothers and Ron's little sister had barely begun to live their fullest of their lives, and Ridley had snuffed them out in the achieve his sick and twisted goal of world domination. He had gotten what he wanted, and Betty wondered what Ridley was doing now, although she had a good guess that he was probably gloating over his success on taking over the world. One day, however, a rebellion would hopefully rise up and take back the control of the world. Although Betty had no idea how long it would take to achieve that goal. No matter how long it took, though, she'd like to see it, and that it would one day happen. Not just for Kim and Ron's sake, but the sake of humanity as well. This would be how Betty would take avenge them. And when she sees it through the end, she and the Resistance were now at the Earth's new heroes, and the heroes that would fight to the bitter and for the better future of all humanity, even at the cost of their own lives. One day freedom would rise again, and a new day would dawn once again.